Going to see if I can actually film some of this and show how this works. I've done the first one. It still needs a little bit of finishing off and making really pretty or accurate. One thing you notice, this is one of the blanks after I put it through the bead roller, and that distorts it. Don't know if you can see. I can't see the camera properly, so I'm not sure what it's looking at, but you can see it's not flat. It's fairly flat that way, but there's definitely sort of wobble in it. I don't worry about that until after I've turned up that edge, and you might be able to see on this one, it ends up fairly flat. There's a little bit of curvature on it, but that's not really going to matter because this is a fuel tank. So the one that goes on the inside especially will be the baffle. So as long as there's enough of an edge to weld it, I'll sort of plug weld through. So that's how it ends up looking. I've been using my 123 block to make sure I've got a nice 90-degree flange. Like I say, this still needs a little bit of finishing off, but to get it to that state, as I mentioned, I start off with the blank and I use my little slotted tool to start bending the edge up. And you sort of go around bit by bit. Because I've already put it through the bead roller, I've already got an edge that it kind of breaks around. And this is where my line is a little bit off center, so I need something a little bit deeper. So I use the adjustable spanner. And like I say, because I've already put that line in it, that's where it's going to bend, mostly. You can adjust it with the hammer and dollies. You can shift that line around. And one of the things with this sort of thing is you work your way around bit by bit. Don't try and do all of one corner in one go, sort of thing. It seems to work better if you work around. And you could be pretty rough at this stage. It doesn't really matter that I'm slightly off center as long as the shape is more or less correct. Because to get this I sort of traced around an outline. So when I go to put the tank together, I'll be trimming all the edges anyway. And I'm hoping that the tank the steel's flexible enough that if these are slightly different shapes on either end, it's not going to matter because they're either end of a long tube of metal. So there'll be a bit of wiggle room. That's my hope. And as you do this, you'll start noticing the little ripples in the edge. These here, or puckers, and they're showing where there's too much metal and where it needs to be shrunk into itself. And that's because you're trying to bend the metal up around a curve, so there's more metal than there needs to be, so it needs to be shrunk. With all this metal whacking stuff, once you get that straight in your head about shrinking and stretching, it makes a lot more sense. It becomes a lot easier to kind of understand what's going on, especially on simple shapes. So you can see it's getting quite wavy. Anyone who's made a pie will know about this, because you cut out a circle of pastry and then put it into a dish, and you need to curve it up and you get all the wrinkles around the outside. Same sort of thing. So now that's roughly bent up. You can see it is very rough. I start with my hammer and my dollies, my bits of metal, and I just start bringing it up. I need to put my earmuffs on for this, and it's going to be hammering, so this might be loud. But I'll see if I can show. Let's see. So what I do is I push this up there, and then I hammer this corner into here, so that starts shrinking that edge down. And you basically keep going round and round like that. As you do it, it'll all distort, it all goes wobbly. And every so often you stop and you tap down the edge, because this is going to curve up. And as you shrink this down, shrink this round, you want to sort of keep flattening this back out onto the flat surface. It kind of makes sense once you start doing it. I'll do a little bit and we'll see what it looks like. So that was going around once, and you can see it's starting to come up, and you get more of these little puckers, and the idea is just to shrink those into themselves. And I'm sort of concentrating on the top edge at the moment. I'm not trying to make this corner tight yet, because you may want to shift that, and so you leave it a little bit rounded to begin with. And as you keep going round and round, this gets closer and closer to being the right sort of shape, like this one. So I'll just go around again. It takes a little while, and you can see what I mean about the distortion now. Probably it's all wavy, it's all over the place, but you sort of fix that a bit later. So I'm going to keep going around with this for a bit longer. So you can see now most of the puckers are out of it. So what I'll do now is start working on getting that corner where I want it. I've been using my little wooden template thing to sort of show how close to the shape I am. That works pretty well. and at some point I'll switch to a different dolly. I like using this one because it's not 90 degrees here. That curve there is good for getting into the curve pieces, and because it's not 90 degrees, it slopes back. I can knock the flange over past 90. It springs back a little bit, so that helps with that. The other thing you start doing now is, once most of the puckers are gone, you start flattening it out by hitting down on this vertically. And that starts flattening it out a little bit. If this isn't shrunk enough, when you do that, you'll actually put puckers back into it. Sort of see them there. So as you do that, you'll see the edge go wobbly again, and you know where you have to do more shrinking. I also just sometimes tap the whole thing flat. That seems to help as well. So now it's a matter of trying to get this. You can see in here, maybe I'm not right up on the line. So this is where I go in with this on the sharp corner, put it right where I want it, and start tapping it from under there, and that'll shift that corner around, shift the bend around. So I'll do that for a little while, try and get the shape a little bit better. things keep falling off my bench with all the hammering. So I've got that edge a bit tighter to where I want it. Check it with my wooden thing. It's still not perfect, but it's getting closer. And to shift the edge, what I find works for me, and I'm not an expert at this, I've just kind of figured this out and are working from some of what my mentor Joss taught me. So I'm really just making this up as I go along, but this is what works for me. To shift the edge, I find it's easier to hold it over the edge of the bench and hit on the corner, bring the corner round. And then once I've got that where I want it, to help square everything up, I have it on the bench and I can slide the hammer. And then eventually I'll switch to this dolly as well. But it's just a matter of sort of going around like that, just bit by bit, tidying it up, shifting the metal to where you want it to go. And there's a little bit of distortion on it, a little bit more that way. In my last film, somebody did mention about using the bead roller to put some beads in the end of this, and that would help stiffen these up as well. So I may give that a try. I'll try it first on the internal baffle, because if it goes wrong, then you won't see it. The only thing I have to check is this lip should be small enough to fit into the slot in the bead roller, I'm hoping. And then I can just do like a cross shape, diagonals, something like that. I'll give that a try and see how that comes out. This still needs tightening up around that bottom edge, and a little bit more shrinking and a little bit more hammering on the edge to get it to sit flat, but it kind of gives you the idea. You kind of get to a point where it can sometimes seem like not a lot's happening. As you get closer to the end, I think sometimes it seems like you're just chasing the wobbles around, but you just keep going at it and it does get there eventually. And like I say, I was using my 1, 2, 3 block, which fell on the floor, because that's handy to see if the flange is up at 90 degrees. You can see this is all over the place still. But I think the overall shape is getting better. It's still not perfect. You can sort of see the gaps. You have to be careful that some of that isn't because this isn't at 90 degrees, but basically I make it so it fits this nicely, and then it'll be close enough. I did try hammering over this, but I find it's too springy and the steel's too thick. So I've just found it's just better and easier for me with the hammer and dollies. I think that might be enough of that. I'll keep going with this. I'll just get my 1, 2, 3 block. And like I say, I've been using that to make sure the flange is at 90 degrees. So we can check. I can see from the pencil lines where it's not quite tight enough yet. So in there, and it's a bit distorted there, so that needs some fixing anyway. So that kind of shows how that works. It's probably close to the same stage as the other one. I still need to tidy up the corner where I moved it a bit, but you can start doing that over the corners of things like this just to tighten that up. But that's probably at the same state as the first one, and they're never going to be perfect. I'm not that patient, to be honest, but they should line up reasonably well. And like I say, when you've got one at one end of the tank and one at the other, you've got a little bit of wiggle room there to sort of adjust things. It's all going to be welded, so the way the welds will work is these will push in that way. So the skin of the tank will be like that, so I can do a weld all the way around there. That's how I'm going to seal that up. One of the comments was I could put a bead all the way around so that the end cap fits in and then comes up against a stop, which might make it a bit easier, but I think because it's like that, there's plenty there for me to clamp. So I've got loads of little vice grips and various clamps. I can just clamp that in place and weld it round. I do have to think about the baffle. So there'll be a baffle in the middle. I'll have to sort of notch out, I'll probably just notch out the corners. So I'll just put little half circles in there. That should be enough to stop the fuel sloshing around. And what I'll do is I'll make up the third one of these and I'll pick the nicest two for the end caps, I guess. Again, the fact that this isn't 100% flat doesn't really matter. And I think these are actually stiff enough that I don't need extra beads in them. This is 1.2 mil thick steel. So there's no oil canning in that. That's not going to move anywhere. And then once that's welded all around the edge, I think it'll be fine. So I don't think there's actually a need for those beads there. Using 1.2 because that's the minimum size it says you can use in the manual. So it's coming along. It's quite tiring, obviously, especially when it's hot. So it's good exercise. I'll tidy these up a little bit more, I think, but that's probably enough bashing on camera.